it's Sophie, and I'm the host of this COVID-19 video series with Well with the World. Today's guest is Abby Bradshaw. She's responsible for producing morning newscasts at WRBL News 3, which is a CBS affiliate in Columbus, Georgia. Hi, Abby, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. I'm glad to be here. How are you?
I'm great, thank you so much. So for people who aren't familiar with you and your work, can you talk a little bit about your background and what it is that you do?
So I produce a morning newscast for WRBL News 3, which is a local news station for the Chattahoochee Valley area, which is considered East Alabama and West Georgia. So basically, I work in the middle of the night like a vampire, and I go in and I see what's going on in the community across the country, regionally, and I decide, okay, what do people need to know about this morning? So I take my news judgment from that and I build a newscast. I write the scripts for the anchors. I stack the stories how I want them to appear. And then once the show airs, I manage it from there, time it, decide which stories are still going to be shown based on how we're progressing through the show, because anything can happen in live TV and you just got to be ready for it. So I also post web content and occasionally go live on Facebook and also post other webs content as well.
Great, thank you. So doing the newscast every day, I'm sure you've been talking a lot about COVID.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and hearing a lot about what's been going on with everybody. So what has been going on with everybody? What are some of the things that people are facing and some of the challenges that you've observed in your community?
Oh, man. There's so many different places to start. I think the first thing that comes to mind is the challenges that I call them healthcare heroes on our front lines, that they're facing. They are working some serious long days and nights as we're all facing a new normal. I've heard about there being a shortage of PPE, which is personal protective equipment, and their perspective too on being on the inside of the coronavirus, because a lot of us right now are looking from the outside in, but we don't see what they're seeing every day with people being in the beds and struggling for air to just breathe. And of course they have to take that home with them and think about that every day. I don't know if you've heard, but recently it's had an effect on mental health too, with people that work in the healthcare field. There was a healthcare worker in New York that unfortunately passed away from suicide from just all the coronavirus stuff that she was seeing. It was really hard on them. So when I think about what's going on in the community, that's the immediate thing that comes to mind. But you wouldn't think that health would impact as many different things as it does, but it's affecting how much we're paying for gas. It's affecting what we can get at the store. It's affecting farmers, believe it or not. It's affecting local business. People are losing their jobs right now because, everything's shut down. You can't go anywhere because of shelter-in-place orders or restricted safer-at-home orders. So everybody, honestly, is impacted in some way, whether you're a healthcare worker, you're a journalist like myself, or whatever you do. It's affecting everybody, whether you're sick or not. So
I'm curious to know as well how you're kind of coming up with the stories if you're not able to get out and speak to people as much as you usually would. How have you been navigating that?
So with journalism, you got to get creative sometimes. And for me, I have to update the numbers every day about how many cases there are, how many deaths. So I check Johns Hopkins University websites and I check the Department of Health websites for Georgia and Alabama. And then also too, with this new challenge, there's also new opportunities to learn how to connect with people. Like you and I right now, we don't live in the same state, but we're able to communicate through a video call. And that's how a lot of us are doing that right now. Most of our staff is actually working from home, but we're still able to, those who do this, go out and get stories, of course, practicing social distancing and adhering to guidelines and whatnot. But there's always some creative alternatives to finding ways to get stories. Technology plays a significant role in doing that. So it's a blessing to be in an age where we are still able to communicate and keep each other informed because of technology bridging that gap. And that also reminds me of another issue, is that rural communities specifically, they are struggling in that aspect because of broadband access. So I know a lot of lawmakers, especially in Alabama too, are pushing to use coronavirus relief funds to expand broadband access, because that not only affects people that are working, but also students that are trying to finish school. So technology plays a big role in how we're able to still connect and stay informed these days.
Yes, absolutely. I've just done another interview this week about the rural health community, so we have a whole episode dedicated to that. I learned so much. I didn't realize how many challenges they were facing. So let's get into talking about some of the practical things that people can do if they're having a really hard time at the moment. Do you have any tips or suggestions or resources for these people?
Right. I think most people right now, they're overloaded with information. And even coming from a journalist standpoint, you turn on the TV, what do you see? It's coronavirus everywhere. You know, you see headlines about death toll rising, or they're saying there's this many cases now, or they think that there might actually even be a second wave of the coronavirus coming. And there's people too, you got to be careful with social media, because not everybody knows where credible sources come from. And I think that's one of the biggest problems now, is misinformation, especially in times like these where information is critical in moving forward and staying connected with other people. So my advice to everyone is, of course, learn how to get credible sources. Don't just share everything you see on Facebook. Don't believe everything you see on there. Don't buy into the gossip. Don't buy into the hype. Know where credible news comes from. I would encourage people to get in touch with their local news stations, find out, and they're people too. So call the station, ask them questions. Hey, I heard you said the cases are going up. Where did you get that information? Because it's all about transparency. Another thing too with credible sources, check for organization websites or government websites. Those are usually almost always credible. If you see anything that are opinion-based websites, try to avoid those. When I build a newscast, I only get information from an official itself, a press release from the actual organization, or I check the agency website. So you want to make sure that you are going straight to the source and not through other people or just random articles that are all over Facebook right now, because let's be honest, there are a lot of them right now.
Yes, I think credible information it can seem quite hard to come by, especially in, like you said, days when there's just so much information everywhere. And you see something, and unless you put the time into thinking, okay, where did this actually come from? Is this true? What does this really mean? A lot of people will just kind of swipe through and read things and take in things without even knowing
Right.
what they're absorbing. Do you think that it's a good, I've seen people on both sides. Some people say that reading about it, learning about it, watching the news is really helpful for them to get their head around what's happening and make the adjustment. And other people say that it kind of brings them down, and it makes their whole life about the pandemic, and it stops them from being able to focus on other things that they're grateful for. Where do you stand on that kind of balance between keeping up to date but also trying to live your life without being in fear all the time?
That's a good point that you just made, because I was just about to bring that up. It is good to stay informed and know what's going on. You should. It's your world. It affects how you're going to live your daily life, but there also is a fine line. Don't overwhelm yourself with information. Don't feel like you have to constantly refresh your feed. We're living in an age that's definitely technology fueled, but we're also living in an age that is addicted to technology and social media. So I think there has to be a point where you take a step back and take a break. Trust the experts to do their job, because we're here and we're getting paid and we're doing our jobs to keep you informed. You don't have to worry about that. Check in periodically, of course, but don't feel like you have to overload yourself, because that's going to give you extra anxiety that you don't need. Because all of us are under some kind of stress right now, because a lot of us are just learning as we go. Even the health experts, we're just watching how this thing plays out. We just have to take it day by day. And if you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, close the app, get out of there. Just take some time to take care of yourself too. I think with people being quarantined at home, it's easy to get lost in social media, and it's easy to get lost in all the headlines, but you have to remember to take a step back from that and just trust the people that are on the front lines or that are giving you that information. Trust them to be able to deliver it, because they will, and you don't have to check it all the time because it gets updated all the time.
Mhm. Yeah, I think maybe having some key sources of information that are credible, just to, you know, stay in the loop, make sure you know how things are changing, how things are going to affect you, but trying not to get sucked into, you know, article after article or video after video. It's tough. I'm wondering if you have any practical suggestions around kind of limiting your overall exposure to news content, or how to even track the amount of time that you spend reading about things.
Yeah, so there's definitely apps out there that you can download to limit your time on social media. You can also download a news app, whether you use a national news network like CBS or CNN, or just your local news, and enable it so it gives you push alerts. So you don't have to check it all the time. You'll just know when it pops up at the top of your screen, hey, there's something going on, and then that's when you can check it.
Hmm.
So I would suggest, maybe once you find yourself going down that rabbit hole, get off, turn on push notifications. So if you do need to know about something, that's when a push alert's going to be sent out. That way you're just not constantly digging and digging and digging for information.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I've never thought of using push notifications in that way. Um, I tend to find it feels like you're adding to the things you have to look at. But if you change your mindset around that and you think, no, I
Right.
don't have to keep going into the apps to look, I can just be told when something new has come in, then yeah, that does dramatically reduce how much you're actually looking at it.
Right. And with news, we're not going to send a push alert for every single story that we post or have in the newscast. That your phone would be blowing up all day. You would want to turn it off or throw it at the wall or something. But I mean, if you think about it, when you get push alerts, it's stuff that you need to know about, or it's breaking news. So trust those push alerts and trust the experts.
Hmm. Great. We've still got 4 or 5 minutes. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about in terms of um, resources or advice, or anything you've heard about that you've found helpful, or anything that you've been doing that's been helpful that you'd like to share with people?
Sure. So, as somebody that's working in news, and this is why I like producing also, is because I'm able to have that creative control over a newscast. I heard you earlier say, and I know a lot of people feel this way. In fact, one of my own parents feels this way. She says, Abby, I only watch the news when I know that you're running the newscast because it's depressing to me. So, I want to encourage people too that it's not all bad news either. Your news stations are also sharing the good stuff too. When I build a newscast, I actually Of course, we need to know the reality of what's going on, but we also need to hear about the good news too, because even in a pandemic, something that really stands out to me is seeing just how many kind-hearted people and selfless people there are stepping up to the plate to make a difference in people's lives that they probably don't even know. I can tell you here in Columbus, just this weekend, there was a sorority organization that gave out free masks and gloves to anybody that wanted it. And the turnout was so big that they had to start 2 hours early. There was another lady here that just gave out free masks because she saw a need in her community. So another thing with that is I try to put good stuff in there so people don't always feel bogged down with death toll rising, increasing numbers. This is what the president says. This is what the World Health Organization says. But also, hey, did you know that the FDA just approved an antibody test? Did you know that NASA just created a ventilator that's short term so that they can use the other ventilators for patients that have more severe cases? And if you want to see more good news, be the good news. Go out in your community and do what you can to make a difference. And actually, today is Giving Tuesday. So if you were looking for a day that was perfect to give back or make an impact somehow, it's a great day to do it. So most hospitals right now, they're asking for masks and gloves and monetary donations too. I've actually seen reports of organizations and just people around the community buying them lunch. So it's the little things. So there is good news out there. That is the good news. But also, you can be the good news too. So don't let this depress you. We're going to make it through. And something else I wanted to comment on too is you've probably seen on social media, we're all in the same boat. I'd like to counter that. I think we're all in the same storm, but I don't think we're all in the same boat. Remember when you're on social media to have compassion for people, because it may not be that serious to you, but to other people, this is their health, these are their family members, this is a serious time. And we need to each take personal accountability for what's going on, because we can't get through this if we don't all take it seriously and take it personal, because you might be in good health, but you could also be carrying the coronavirus and not know it. Not to scare anyone, but that's the reality of it, and that's why we're told to social distance. So take it seriously, but don't buy into the hype that you see on social media either. Know where you get your sources from, stay informed, but don't overload yourself at the same time.
Well, I think that sums everything up perfectly. Thank you so much, Abby, for being our guest today.